Let's pay respect to our Jhana tables.
Sound check, okay, in the back. So, how's it going? All right. Apparently there was some people were hungry in the afternoon and evening. And can I just suggest, if your metabolism isn't used to eating once or twice a day and you want to eat in the evenings, just change that precept to just eating one time in the evening. Eat 3 times, make it simple. I think there's some complexity with the kitchen making more food and then food is left over. So just like these kind of personal disciplines around something like food, it's basically so you're not just constantly nibbling and grazing and snacking and basically distracting. So when you set, like if you're hypoglycemic or you have diabetes, then these disciplines don't work so well. So set something for yourself. So if you are hungry in the evening, no problem, but make it kind of definite rather than 2 or 3 hours of nibbling or whatever. So it becomes another kind of practice. The gentleman asked me just to mention that to you. So what are we doing? Do you get what I mean when I say that samadhi should lead to sammasankappa? Insight should lead to right thinking. I mean, that's obvious in anything you do. So if I am making, like I just made a chair, and the last piece of furniture I made. So this is a mortise and tenon joint here, I think. So the mortise is a square hole in this piece, and the tenon is a tongue in this piece. So to make the mortise, I have to measure it very, very carefully, and then I have to have the sides of the after the chisel quite vertical, perfectly symmetrical to make a good square hole, and then I can make the tongue and so on. So then I do it the first time, it's actually beveled in, say, and it's not fitting. I have to. So through time, I learn how to place the chisel correctly, how to keep my eye accurately on the marking line, and how to go straight down. And then next time I do it, I tell myself that, okay, come on, keep it straight, focus. So that's a natural way we learn, don't we? It's just a very, very natural way that we develop skills. We talk to ourselves. And if I've done it wrong, then I might talk to myself, you slob, you did it wrong again. That's not very helpful. But what's helpful is you need to be more accurate here. You need to be more careful or keep it more vertical, as an example. So in the same way, meditation is a skill, and any understanding you have about your own character and how that applies to meditation then should condition the language that you use for meditation. And if the language then is in line with the end of suffering, then you see that your insights are on the right track for the end of suffering. So the language I was suggesting this morning, for me, again, this is for me, you can figure out your own language. You can use English or Mandarin, or I just found out that you can read Mandarin texts in Hokkien and Cantonese. Isn't that amazing? You can have the same it's fascinating. You can have the same alphabet and read it totally different. So I asked this lady, could one person then read the same text in a Hokkien dialect and in a Cantonese? She said yes. Anyway, that's an aside. But language as a kind of insight. So I'm not talking about Hokkien or Chinese or Canadian or whatever. it's about your own insight and how do you put that to words. And I find that very, very important in my own practice. So I have a personal vocabulary which brings me back to my own understanding and my own insights. And the understanding isn't academic. It's not. I'm not trying to mimic Buddhist teaching in some kind of doctrinal way. It's not a dogma, let's say. So these words that I offer you are words that very, very much work for me. So around vibhava tanha, the desire to get rid of. The desire to get rid of is a tension. It's a holding. It's a tension, and I'm suggesting that there's a way of actually relaxing into the state of awareness. So vibhava tanha is not a state of relaxation. It's a state of wanting, which is a kind of tension. So then I might put into the two words I tend to use is non-anticipation and non-resistance. And I maybe some of you were part of that. I was part of some Zoom sessions maybe a couple of years ago, and I think I suggested, here's your homework for the next year. Do non-resistance. You see what I mean? Where you take just one word, but it's a profound word because 1/3 of the second and third noble truth is vibhava tanha, the desire not to have or the desire to get rid of. And you take one word, okay, that's what I'm going to study, resistance and non-resistance, what that is. And that would give you, I think, quite a depth of understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And that's what I mean by encyclopedic and depth. So encyclopedic, I might read many commentaries on vibhava tanha, what this text says, what that text says, and read it again and again and again. But that would be knowledge and someone else's knowledge. It might help me to consider what I do, but then my own insights would be through an investigation of craving, and this particular kind of craving to get rid of, and then I would get a language which would help me to do that kind of investigation. So I use non-resistance. So if like right now at Karina and William's place, there's a 3 doors down, there's someone is renovating their home, and this is a row of terraced houses, and they're all connected by concrete, as you do in this part of the world. And so the kango hammers are going, and sound really carries through concrete very, very loudly, as we all know. So I was having a rest, and then at 1:10, 1:15, really, really loud. And then non-resistance. Sound feels this way. It's not a big deal, right? But if I'm not aware of that, and I just, I wish they'd stop, I'm always in the object, resisting the object. That's a trivial example, and we all know how to handle that. But take a person, say, in some social situation that you find bothersome in some way. But again, the person is not acting immorally, just their character gets up your nose. And then you're not noticing that. You're not noticing that you wish they would stop talking, or you wish that they would go away, or you want to challenge them or whatever. There's a tension there. That tension's going on. Now, if you're practicing inner awareness, you're practicing what's going on in the citta, then you're going to feel that. You'll know that. And although you have to kind of interact with the person, you can also begin to practice inner vigilance. And inner vigilance would say non-resistance, which wouldn't be the same as saying, I like this person, or I shouldn't not like him. It'd be more referring to the tension and the holding in the heart. So you'd start to use that language internally, non-resistance. And then you feel it. You start to feel it. So I ask you, do you have a language of insight? Not a doctrinal language. Because we're all intelligent, we all have insights. Do you use language in that way? or some suggestion, some way of suggesting to your mind things you've already understood. So when we cultivate in these ways, we start to get a collection of practices and upaya and skillful means which become integrated into our everyday, ordinary mindfulness practice. So body awareness. I just did this very brief whole body awareness. If you do that a lot, you do it several times in a week, you do it when you're laying down, what that develops in you is a sensitivity to bodily tension, because you are more aware of the body. When I ask you, notice your, make conscious the feelings in your right shoulder. You know, your right shoulder, usually you don't pay much attention to it unless it hurts, and then you pay attention to it, and all of a sudden sensations and things come up into conscious in the right shoulder. Do that with the whole body. Do that for a few years, and you have body awareness. Body awareness. So then I'm speaking to the person who I don't get along with, and then not only is it a mental formation, it's also a bodily formation, tension, resistance. Oh, resistance feels like this, the kind of inner vigilance that I practice. So you have body awareness. Then you have maybe like models of like background, foreground. So I guess I would ask you, do you have, let me see, say, are you, like for me, what's very, very important to Theravada Buddhism was, Luang Por introduced me to this, but I'm curious about the Buddha's enlightenment. Kind of, it's my sort of business. And I think we all are. And it seems to me that when the Buddha first taught, apparently, he said that there is the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unformed, the deathless, the harbor, the island, peace, nibbana. So I tend to just throw out nibbana because it sounds like a spa or a rock group or something, right? So that becomes a corrupted word in modern society, okay? Or a trivial word, whatever. So you have like harbor, like this morning I was saying. And if there were not the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, the harbor, the peace, the deathless, there would be no freedom or release from the conditioned, from the born, from birth and death, from that which begins and ends. So my take on it is that the whole teaching must be referring to that. The whole teaching must be somehow leading us to that insight. So that the psychological teaching can't be just psychology. It must be pointing to that. So I would ask you, do you have a sense of transcendence in your spiritual aspiration? Or is Buddhism simply like a psychological tool to make you feel better? Or is it a kind of perception of me having a good rebirth? Because rebirth is not transcendent. Rebirth is recycling, right? Recycling's fine, we're all into it, and hopefully we get good products next time. But it's not transcendent. It is important in Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist doctrine, but it's not a transcendent realization. So, I don't know where you're at with this, but to me, that seems paramount. So then, the Four Noble Truths make a lot of sense to me, because what they're pointing to is the fallibility and the limitations and the dukkha of all conditioned experience. All conditioned experience begins and ends. So if I'm seeking the transcendent, the deathless, the unconditioned, the harbor, the peace, in that which is born and dying, which is changing, which is unreliable, I'm looking in the wrong place. I'm just looking in the wrong place. So there's nothing wrong with sensual happiness. There's nothing wrong with our emotional life. It's just if I think that the transcendent realization is there, I'm just looking in the wrong place. It's like you've probably heard that Sufi story about Nasruddin. Nasruddin is the mad Sufi, and Nasruddin is sitting outside of a spice shop, and there's a big basket of these dynamite chilies, and he's chewing on these really hot, red hot dynamite chilies, and he's crying. He's so it's horrible. And his mate comes up and he says, Nasruddin, what are you doing? Nasruddin says, I'm trying to find a sweet one. And that is when you look if you look for transcendence in an experience, you're looking in the wrong place. It's just red hot chilies. Don't go for it. So there's nothing wrong with happiness. There's nothing wrong with the sensual life. But if we're interested in transcendence, and if this language of uncreated, unconditioned, and so on is appealing to us, then we have to look in the right place. So tanha then is the hook that makes us look into the wrong place. Pleasant, unpleasant, and then the craving based upon that. There's nothing wrong with desire. It is as it is. And there's nothing really wrong with hatred. It just messes you up a bit. But those are always the hooks into birth and death, into the sensual world. And to me, that is the fundamental definition of renunciation. Not kind of shaving your head and wearing a brown robe, or even keeping certain types of precepts, but that fundamental insight that you cannot find the unconditioned in the conditioned. You cannot find the unborn in that which is born and dying. And that's a sort of change of like a paradigm shift, I suppose, where you stop looking outwards and you start to look inwards, not just in a psychological sense, because your emotions are still outward. They're still objects. You may think they're in me, but actually they're still objects in awareness. If you listen to the sound of the Kango hammer going on in the apartment block, in the block of houses, that sound is an object. But if I start to grumble about it, this sound is terrible, that's still an object, right? So when we're looking inward, we're not just looking at our own psychology. I mean, we're trying to be better people, but we're looking beyond even the psychology, beyond the emotions. And what's beyond that is awareness itself. And the awareness itself is experiential, but it's not an object. When I just walked through this fantastic monastery temple, I've never seen anything like it. So walking through it, my mind goes out into the imagery, into the craftsmanship, and then it appreciates or is in awe or is confused or whatever. That's normal. And then I go back to the monastery in Canada, I get a different sense experience. That's normal. But what is it that didn't change? What is it that when I walk through the grounds here, didn't change? And what is the same when I go back to Canada? It's awareness. It's the knowing. Now is the knowing. To me, that is the gateway to transcendence. And as I was saying before, gateway participates in both the outer and inner. So taking refuge in Buddha, knowing Dharma, is refuge in knowing life is like this. And then trusting in that refuge. From that sense of refuge or relaxation or awareness, then you kind of see the pull of the mind outside. And you can mod it. You can. I mean, I look at things. I'm not a zombie, right? And I eat vegetables and all kinds of interesting things like that. But that's not transcendent. I know that's limited. So if I expect too much from the world of senses, then I'm looking in the wrong place. So the sense of relaxation for me is a kind of interesting contemplation. What is the mind that's relaxed in awareness? And what is the mind which is tense in becoming or resisting or whatever it might be? And that's what I'm sort of trying to indicate in this wee retreat that we're having. Body awareness helps. Obviously, awareness of your inner workings helps. Language that relaxes you into the present moment, that helps. And then the insight is constantly the same thing. What is it about this awakened mind that is silent? Can we be silent? Can we be still? And we can if we're just very, very patient with our thinking mind. We see the mind going out into thought. We say, thought feels like this. And just remember and trust in awareness. And you do have to trust in awareness. So that's kind of where my kind of, the underpinning of my own attitudes to this practice and why I speak the way I speak. So let's do some more meditation, and I'll just maybe, I don't know quite what I'll do, but we'll do something. So, take a posture. You say if you just begin, it's like this. And then just notice how you feel sitting here. And the language then that I've been trying to encourage. So first of all, receptive awareness. Let just things arise. Come and go. Receptive awareness. Non-becoming, not going anywhere. And then non-resistance, non-anticipation. Life is like this. And then try to notice the silence of awareness. There's the movement of sound changing. That can be known. And now is the knowing. And be that knowing. And as we sit in this kind of choiceless awareness, what's good to observe is the tendency then, in a very short while, to start to look for something rather than observing what is. So receptive awareness knows what is. Silent knowing, and the tension of desire then starts to come up, looking for something. Then the ideas of resting in awareness or resting as awareness. the background. Foreground in this, let's say sound, bodily feeling, changing. Background, awareness, knowing, silent. So this is the doorway. So can we keep that doorway open? Whatever happens in the thinking mind, can you return to the simple, it's like this, silent knowing, receptive awareness. You can see it like learning how to ride a bicycle. You get the point of balance. The point of balance is this, it's like this. That's the point of balance, knowing. And then going off balance, getting caught up in thoughts, trying to get rid of things. So what if we just made Samadhi just returning to balance? It's like this. And sustaining that balance, knowing. So this we call choiceless awareness. So attention gets reborn into some future thought or some thought about the past. And then there's the interruption, say my voice or pain. In that moment, when you notice you've been thinking, thinking is actually stopped. Try to get that reference. And then it's like this. And the silence of knowing. And then trust in the silence of knowing. Rather than picking up an object and trying to force the mind not to think. Let's do the walking for 45 minutes. Can you give a teaching on the correct pace of walking meditation? I understand from Ajahn Martin that we should keep a normal walking pace instead of exaggeratedly slow movements so that we are less likely to daydream and lose sati. I disagree with that. I think you just, like the Mahasi Sayadaw uses slow walking, and that has, people I've talked to, has very good effects. I'm just used to walking this pace, but when I was a younger monk, I would walk much more vigorously because it suited my body. If I had a lot of coarse energy going through me in terms of anger or lust or something like that, then I'd walk furiously. So really I was more interested in the mind than the pace of walking. And then I would just play around, and I still do, I suppose. I just play around with what seems effective. So I've never been one to just create a kind of arbitrary mechanism of how you have to practice. Each one of us is different. And so I started with a Mahasi tradition as a Samanera, but I didn't stay for very long, so I never developed that. So it would be wrong for me to say anything about the Mahasi tradition of slow walking, because I haven't really done it. Just like let's say, the Tibetan tradition, what they'll do, like 100,000 prostrations with visualizations and with chanting. I have no idea what that would do. It would probably wreck my knees, but I cannot really comment on that in any fair way. So one must be careful not to, I think, prejudge how things might work. But certainly the Mahasi tradition with slow walking is a venerable tradition, and I know people who really benefit from it. But they also do retreats where they do normal walking. So I wouldn't say there's a correct pace. The correct pace really is knowing your own mind, and then using bodily formations to help you stay more aware. So it's kind of just very ordinary in that sense. And remember, if a teacher tells you something, you don't have to believe it. You can reflect on it, and that's important, I think, because a teacher just is coming from his own experience, and any teacher's going to have views and opinions, which is fine, but then you have to say, well, yeah, but let me see, is that really fit? Not in an aggressive and assertive way, but just a mature and intelligent way about what works for you. So, if my meditation object is hearing awareness, the foreground is the outside noises that come and go, like the sound of cars going by, birds chirping, etc. The background is the ever-present silence that is always there, even when there are noises. It's just noises overlaying on the silence. Am I correct? Yes. If yes, how can I proceed to improve my meditation after this awareness? Well, I guess you look at the desire to improve. Like this, because it's not a really technique. I guess the question I'd ask this person is where does the awake mind get lost? Put it that way. In what kind of situation does the ego mind of like really strong thinking, ego thinking, where does that manifest the most? where does, maybe it's like self-doubt. Maybe the person just goes into self-doubt very easily. Okay, then that's the place where one hasn't really understood what the awake mind is, and that's where you need to investigate. So it's very, very much daily life practice, and like in a retreat like this, and even more so in a residential retreat, what you have is sense deprivation, which is a quietening of the mind because it's a kind of contextual thing. It's contingent on a silent atmosphere. So you get a certain amount of tranquility because of sense deprivation. But sense deprivation, you just can't live your life like that all the time. You probably wouldn't want to. So then the challenge is in more loud sense impressions or confused sense impressions, how to sustain a mind which doesn't just get caught up in samsara. And that the training that you get in this lovely situation here where we're very silent, cooperative, and I'm really admiring how well everyone's walking. There's been no accidents, I think. It's incredible. It's just like, ooh, really, really very nice. And we're Kalyanamitta, we might not know each other, but we are friends. So that's extraordinary. The world sometimes isn't friendly. It's all kinds of things. So we want to create the self-understanding of what this practice is for us in these situations of wholesomeness and goodness that we're gifted with, and then take the challenge of complexity of family life and vocation life and so on, and say where does awareness get lost? How does the sense, especially like the sense of ego, like strong sense of self that arises in the thinking mind, when is that really believed? So that's very, very personal, but it is a 24/7 kind of practice. The thing I like about this practice, it's not a constructed experience. Like sometimes we have this idea, we kind of build something up. We get more and more tranquility and more tranquility, and we build things up, which is all right, but awareness isn't something you build up, it's something you develop the skill of remembering, maybe it's like that. So where do I forget? So we talk about forgetfulness, don't we? When we lose sati. Yeah. But good question. May I know how you overcome laziness? For example, when the mind refuses to get up in the morning. Well, maybe the body could get up. Anyway, when the mind refuses to get up in the morning, I have to snooze the alarm a few times before the mind is willing to get up. You're welcome. You're sleeping so nice, right? So comfortable. We in Canada, we have our kutis the floors are very cold. We have wood stoves, and so we have either sleeping bags or duvets, pretty thick duvets sometimes, and we call the duvet the fourth refuge. You just put it over your head in the morning and disappear. How do you overcome laziness? Well, put on 4 alarms at once. Put them far away from your bed, and make sure they're horrible. They're really horrible sounds. Oh, I get it. I would say that if your meditation brings wholesome results, and you have a feeling of, first of all, fulfilling your aspiration. Because for me, in my monastic life, if I didn't really fulfill my aspiration, I always felt like I was cheating. And not that I did that often, but I felt, no, that's not a way to go. So there is something in us, because we're here, because we have noble principles and noble aspirations. When we don't do that, quite often we get a feeling like we're missing it. We're not fulfilling that yearning that we have. Now that could take you to feeling guilty. You don't want that. But if I could see the contrast between, getting up and doing a good session of meditation and how well that feels, how really wholesome that feels, and how that sets up my day, and then the other, where I kind of just slept to the last moment and brushed my teeth on the way to the bus, is a whole different kind of a feeling, isn't it? So that cause and effect, what the feeling of wholesomeness, the feeling of goodness, and say, no, I want to do that. I want to do that. Sometimes making adhitanas, determinations with teachers is good. You make a determination with a teacher you respect or an elder you respect, and you say, I'm going to do this, so that gives you some energy. Shaving your head, going to a monastery. I suppose also, like, what kind of inputs are you putting into consciousness that would, I'm just thinking aloud, would not a very distracted life, like if I just spent a lot of time, gross example, if I spent a lot of time looking at Netflix, I've never seen Netflix, but I have heard about it. A lot of movies, say. And just did a lot of distracting things. It seems to me the meditation would be more difficult because my mind would be more restless, wouldn't it? It's like the first day of a retreat is, quite often we have dullness and sleepiness pretty predominant. And then if we hang in and we have some experience at the end of the retreat, there's much more clarity and it's kind of easier to meditate. So if one has not, what we call it maintenance work. If you haven't done your daily maintenance work, that each time you kind of miss out, it's harder to meditate. And then you're desperate, so you have to go on a retreat. Get back in the ball game and start again. So all those things become kind of paramount in making that morning meditation a high priority. How do you make things high priority? I guess you just try, don't you? In terms of, say, bashing the snooze alarm, what you can do then is you roll over on your back and do yoga nidra, that lying meditation I was suggesting, and don't get comfortable. Don't go on your side. 15 more minutes. But actually, just lay down, under the covers or whatever. Lay out in yoga nidra or savasana, and do the lying meditation. Try that. That can be quite effective. Very, very effective. No obvious answer. Yesterday, when you mentioned about the 8 precepts, killing and stealing are moral precepts, the rest are renunciant. No, I didn't say the rest are renunciant. I didn't say that. I said the last 3 were. So I didn't. And what about telling lies? No, that's a moral precept. So maybe I did say that. If I did, I'm sorry. But I was really talking about celibacy, entertainment, luxury, and those kind of distracting things. So yeah, the right speech is a moral precept. So telling lies is a moral consideration. So if I misguided you there, I'm sorry, but I don't think I said that. But in the precepts in general, realize that they're not binary. They're not like on and off. They're a spectrum, aren't they? So killing a mosquito is different than shooting your neighbor in the head. Obviously, there are going to be more profound consequences. Inadvertently covering up something that you did out of embarrassment is different than lying manipulatively in order to hurt someone. So remember that although the word morality is a kind of one word, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities in the practice of the moral precepts. And in terms of right speech, that's a lifetime work, isn't it? Just like how many people get mess things up with a stupid email, and it's gone and you can't get it back. So it's a very difficult precept to practice, but it's kind of a guideline for being careful, being sensitive. But if one is like really grossly lying, then that's a bad sign, because the whole teaching is based on truthfulness, satyabarami. And if I can't be truthful, then that's not very good. But where lying, I think, is very, very destructive is when I'm lying about my intentions. So I might not be verbally lying to someone, but I'm not honest about my intentions, and then it's pretty hard to get out of samsara. Because if I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm lying to myself about what I'm doing, then the consequences I can never really fully understand. So satyabarami, truthfulness, is terribly important. But do remember the kind of that the precepts aren't binary; they're not just black and white. Luang Por, I have no inclination towards chanting mantra and sutras. Even if I start, I can't sustain it. Is that a real obstacle? No? No? No. Only if you think it's an obstacle. If your culture has told you, thou must chant sutras, and then you believe that, and then you feel guilty, then that's what we call silabhata paramasa, belief in cultural structures, which then create a kind of ego identity. Oh, I should be chanting, they're chanting. Actually, I hate chanting. Oh, I'm a bad monk. But actually, no. But if you're in a group where everyone's chanting, it might be polite to at least go umba, umba, umba or something. Kind of, that's what Ajahn Chah told us to do. He said, if you don't know the chanting, just go umba, umba, umba. So, personal preference is there, but also just like social sensitivity. So if I rarely go to a Christian church, but if every now and then I happen to be in a Christian service, when everyone stands up, I stand up. I don't say the prayers, but I try to be sensitive to that. But it's certainly not an obstacle. Like for me, my voice is pretty old, and so it cracks up, so I don't lead the chanting anymore. I used to like chanting, so definitely it's not a problem. But the whole thing of silabhata paramasa, cultural attachments, those are interesting. Like those are very interesting about what a woman should be, what a man should be, what a monk should be, and all the different societal pressures we have, which create a sense of self. They can be very, very strong. I somehow feel bad about this pecking order that I choose to have for practice of metta bhavana. It is like amongst those I want to send metta to, I am discriminating in who I choose to receive my metta. That's very confused. Metta is not prayer. You know, like, I don't know where this has come up in Buddhism. When we do metta bhavana, we're not praying. I'm not kind of saying, Luang Por, may you be well, and then there it goes. It hit him. You know, it's not like that. It's simply about the mind picking up wholesomeness and sustaining wholesomeness. That's all it is. So in stream of consciousness, you bring up a wholesome memory reflection, un postredo, and then you let the mind abide in that. But sending prayers, I mean, you can do it. Go for it. Send me lots of prayers. I don't mind. But that's really not what Metta Bhavana is about. That's a kind of cultural thing that we do. But the whole sense that I'm here and you're out there and all those structures, that's the dualistic part of Buddhism, which is sila and dana and social responsibility. But when we're developing the mind, we're letting go of duality, and we're witnessing the changing nature of the khandhas, or the changing nature of sense consciousness, as arising and ceasing, anicca dukkha anatta. And in that context, not in the context of duality, in that context, when the mind is imbued with metta or the Brahma Viharas, then it's a very wholesome state of mind. It's very helpful. So if I can bring metta into consciousness, Luang Por, may you be well, that brings forth a kind of very wholesome state of mind. And the longer I can sustain that, the better. But I don't send him an email. I said, did you get that? Well, I did 2 hours on you. What happened? So I make jokes about this, but it's not prayer. It really isn't prayer. I don't know about the efficacy of prayer, but you won't find that in like Buddhist texts. You find that in modern, maybe it's always been there. And I'm not dismissing that it might have some efficacy, but a good story for me was I was teaching a retreat in Auckland many years ago in New Zealand, and we were doing Metta Bhavana, and in between the meditations or something, I saw a good friend who was the president of the Auckland Association, and I said, so how's it going? She says, oh, I'm exhausted. I've got a big family. So and also I want to give everyone just the same amount. So here she is, she's got 20 relatives, and she's trying to chop up all her metta and give each one. It's like giving everyone a sandwich. But, it's really not about that. It's about the heart being happy with metta. So you don't have to think about any person, or you think about one person in that way. And there was another woman there, and this was during the bombing of Belgrade in former Yugoslavia, and NATO was involved in the war there, as you might remember. And she was sending metta to all the people getting bombed in Belgrade, and she was crying. She said, "Oh, I'm not winning on this one," and like she was taking on the whole karma of Belgrade and the war as a kind of heavy burden, and trying to send out metta to heal them. That's not what it's about. It's just about bringing the mind to wholesomeness and cultivating wholesome. And then if you want to pray, sure, you do that. And again, I don't know the efficacy of that. There's nothing wrong with that. And it can make you feel very good. And if people hear about that, they feel very good. That's all well and good. But in the contemplative or meditative sense, we're bringing the mind to wholesomeness and sustaining wholesomeness in that way. And then, of course, it helps to see unwholesome states of mind, such as aversion, makes you more aware of them. Oh, here we go. Can meditation help remove the extreme fear for dogs? You should meet Bruno. That's our dog. Yes and no. Awareness of fear certainly is the important part of any kind of a fear. The way I would look at that is fear is a fundamental construct of our habitual mind. Fear is also biological, right? So the fear of a rabid dog is a good fear. I've been in India, and way back when I was a layman, and there was a dog that came into a compound where there was a tea shop, and I was having tea, a rabid dog. I'd never seen a rabid dog before, and everyone jumped up on the tables. And this thing was crazy. It was really frothing crazy, and it was so fear-inducing. But that's a good fear. That's a fear that was saving my life. But then, of course, you get fears getting mixed up. So you have a dog, which is a serious animal, and then you have maybe childhood experience. So maybe as a child, the person got whatever with a dog or whatever reason, and now the habit of fear with the dog is both biological but also psychological from history. So it's a bit of a knot to unravel. First of all, I wouldn't make it a problem. Like, I wouldn't make, I've got this fear of dog issue, and go to a therapist and try to sort it out. I just wouldn't make it a problem, and don't self-identify with it. I shouldn't have fear of dogs, and don't create an ego around it. I think that's very, very important. And then, if the fear comes up, see if in a safe space you can witness the fear as a visceral experience rather than as a thought thing. Where is it in the heart? Where is it in the body? Where is it in the energy system? And then become more and more aware of that. And I suppose you'd have some kind of, you find the perfect dog like our dog Bruno, and then Bruno gives you a hug and you're okay, and that would be nice. But I think the foremost is don't castigate yourself for these things. Quite often they're coming from childhood or in places where it's quite often difficult to extricate them. They're kind of grown into one's conscious experience. Do the best you can. But I would say that any iteration of fear which can be known is a chance for liberating the heart from fear. In that sense, it's very, very valuable. So if a person could see that one instance of fear is going to help all instances of fear, if I understand it. So it's not just about the dog, it's about fear itself. So if I feel safe enough, and the environment allows it, and I say, next time the fear of dogs comes up, and I feel safe, I'm going to try to really feel the fear of dogs. And no, fear is fear now, not just as dog fear. Fear is this way, it feels this way. Then I would say that's the slow liberation of fear from the heart, which is incredibly important, incredibly valuable. And then it will apply to all kinds of other fears. But you imagine, if it comes from childhood, those things can be deeply rooted. So be kind to yourself, and do the best you can. In a retreat like this, and in particular the duration of on Metta Bhavana, of the sitting, I suppose, on Metta Bhavana, am I supposed to spend the entire sitting on radiating loving kindness, or supposed to just sitting with breathing as object, like what I usually do? I say just do what you usually do, and all I really want to do with that little practice is get the mind in the tone of kindness. Because it's an attitude, and an attitude which accepts all things and rejects none. So if you get that sensibility, then just with the breath is fine. But I'm not suggesting you produce any kind of fantastic experience. It's just what is the tone of metta in relationship to awareness? Because awareness can have a sense of control, a sense of maybe trying to get something, or a sense of acceptance. So it relates to my suggestion of receptive awareness. That awareness and kindness can be conjoined in that way. I find that I always unknowingly transition from awareness to a state of zone out. By the time I realized I have zoned out, I feel that I have been in that state for a long time. How do I catch the transition earlier? I don't know what zone out is, but at some point you know. Well, okay, one way is to kind of program your intentions at the beginning of a meditation. Say, I'm going to try to notice whatever this is as it arises. So then you try to, you set up, okay, this is a feeling of not zone out. That you know for sure. This isn't that feeling. And then at some point, when there's noticing of that, then that will be the point of not zone out. Because you notice it. And then the more you establish that non-zone out, then the zone out becomes more obvious, rather than trying to do something about it. So in this case, the person feels that they've been gone a long, long time. All you can really know is there's a perception that I have been gone a long, long time, which is an ego perception. I am someone who has zoned out, and so that creates a sense of self, and then you try to do something about it. But I would suggest that presence is never absent. It's a tricky one. Presence is never absent. So try not to create a sense of self around the zone. Just, this is what it feels like now. Try not to create a sense of me having a zone out problem, and I have to practice now so that I can see my zone out problem arising. Because that's attavada, that's personality view, and I would say that it's got a good intention, but it's still based on me getting something called an insight around zone out consciousness. So if in that moment when there's true noticing of that, then go to silence. Okay, it's like this now. This is non-zone out. Or this is what it feels like not zoned out. And then between that and that space then will show you eventually how the zone out mindset rises. But also suggests that presence is never absent. And that's another way to kind of approach it. So you can, like in walking meditation, this is very kind of Zen, I suppose, that kind of question. But as you walk back and forth, is presence ever absent? Because then you're really looking at the mind, awareness looking at awareness. That can have great power. But in both the fear of the dog and in the zone out thing, the sense of personality that gets built around these experiences. I am this person who has this. Try to drop that and just see things before personality view, Sakkaya Ditthi, comes into play. And that's why this language, it's like this, is useful. Does right concentration play a role in this awareness practice? Well, I would say this awareness practice is right concentration. Okay, but I don't know how you define right concentration. Now, if you define right concentration at all kinds of levels of deep samadhi, then this might not make sense. But I define it, I try to see where does right concentration fit into the whole Noble Eightfold Path. What I find oftentimes is that people take right concentration as a whole separate piece, somehow divorced from the Noble Eightfold Path. My take on it is, where does it fit in the Noble Eightfold Path? And to me, right concentration must serve Nirodha. It must serve the cessation of suffering. That's what it must do. And then, if it serves Nirodha, then it must serve Samudaya. It must be a way of seeing the cause of suffering, attachment to desire. And the way I would perceive that as possible is through right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So right concentration would be awake to the way things are. Effort and mindfulness would be sustaining that for spans of time. That's how I define it. But I know it's defined in many, many ways by many people. Sure, so that's where the person's at. Did Buddha use this method in his practice leading to enlightenment? And I understand he went into deep jhanas before his enlightenment. I don't know. I wasn't there. And the whole language around jhana is actually, a lot of it comes from Visuddhimagga. And it's a kind of commentarial thing that comes through the Visuddhimagga and has been standardized in especially in the Burmese tradition. Now, Luang Por really didn't talk about the jhanas, and if you want to read an alternative take on the jhanas, you might have a look at Venerable Kumara's What You Might Not Have Known About Jhana and Samadhi. That's a very good essay on how that word jhana has maybe been misused and maybe misinterpreted, or how it is used in other ways, other possibilities. So I had a very interesting experience when we did a retreat in Dhammagiri in Mahong Son. And on that retreat, there was a woman from Beijing who was a translator, and she came to the suttas through the agamas, which are the Chinese equivalent of the suttas. I don't know which Chinese scripts they're in, but she was saying that the word jhana, which is dhyana in Sanskrit, is Zen in Japan, is Chan in China. She said that the word jhana did not mean absorption, it meant one-placedness, just one place at one time, rather than absorption into an object. And when she came across that in Theravada, she was very surprised, because her take of it, that jhana was really meditation. And you could see her whole perception around that was different than people who had had a different interpretation of it. It was very interesting talking with her about that. So I take that word to mean meditation, and I'm not a scholar, but from that essay, the examples he cited is that the word was used in many ways, in many instances, in different ways. So my own teachers have never emphasized Samma Samadhi in that way. They've emphasized it more in the sustained awakening to the way things are. So that's where I'm coming from. But perhaps we could, on whatever website this retreat is on, we could maybe post that article. Some of you might have read it already. It's a very good article. And then you can have a look for yourself. I think it's an important one to read, so you get kind of alternative perspectives on how that word is used. All right? I'll ask Bita, she'll probably know where we can post that on the BuddhaDhamma Foundation. I don't get this. I'll have to, couldn't figure that one out. Try later. What are some effective ways to stop thinking during meditation? Do we count the steps, or chant a mantra like Bhutto, or do we walk quickly or slowly? Well, infinite patience, boundless compassion, could do that. Each time you hear the mind thinking, first of all, don't try to get rid of thinking. Be patient, be patient, be patient. And then, when you notice thinking, take 4 words, infinite patience, balanced compassion, and establish silence. And that you might have to do that 100 times in a half an hour. Fine, that's what you do. So what you do is, rather than trying to get rid of thought, you use a constructed thought which has a good meaning, and you use that deliberately, not to get rid of thought, you use it deliberately, and you establish silent awareness. And you do it again, and again, and again. That's a kind of mantric form. I realize thought's very frustrating, and I think the problem is that we try to get rid of thinking, rather than notice the end of thought. And I've talked about that quite a bit. So that's what you can investigate. When thought comes up, do you say, oh no, there I'm thinking again, I have to stop thinking? That's creating attavada again, sense of self and time, as opposed to, oh, thought feels like this. That doesn't create a sense of self. And the entry into Dhamma is always through the abandonment of Sakkaya Ditthi, a personality view. I'm someone who's thinking too much. You know you're not. If you are the person who's thinking too much, then stop thinking. If you're doing it, well, just stop thinking. Right? But you're not. Thoughts arise according to causes and conditions. You think about it. Well, don't think about too much. If I am really, it's my fault for all this thought that's being produced, then I won't produce it. Thank you very much. And it won't work, will it? Because thought is dharma. It's nature, dhammacakka. So the question is then, what are the causes and conditions for the non-attachment to thinking? That's a different kind of thing. And the suggestion is then, when you awaken to the fact that thinking is there, just come back to present moment awareness, rather than create a sense of ego. I'm thinking too much, I have to control my mind and stop thinking, and then allow thinking to kind of slow down. That was really, I think, the first question I asked Ajahn Chah as a Samanera, and someone translated it for me. He said, what do I do about this thinking? It just goes on and on. He says, it's natural. And that surprised me. I thought he'd give me some really cool technique. And it's natural. Yeah, but it just keeps going on and on and on. And then he started to instruct on how to notice thought as an object, to notice the space between thoughts. So two things. You have to look at the moment that you notice the thinking. What do you do? In that moment, do you say, oh gosh, there it is again? Or do you say, oh good, I'm back again? That's what I suggested yesterday. Oh, I'm back again, here I am. Then there's no desire. You say, I'm back again, I'm home again. Good. Rather than, oh, now I have to try harder. Count the steps, 1, 2, 3. And your mind just goes off to Antarctica, right? and because thought is natural, and we're just trying to witness thought. You do get better at it. But that's the one we all struggle with, I think. You know what's really nice about these questions? Is they're very personal. And probably the next one's going to be different. Shouldn't have said. But that, for a teacher, that's great. It's not like some opinion about how many devas there are in the 16th realm of devas or something like that. It's very, this is the stuff we're working with. And as a teacher, it's very, very gratifying to actually consider these things, as opposed to just, how does rebirth work? I don't know. The inner voice. Is awareness means being aware of the inner voice in our head and not identifying with it? Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, to notice the inner voice and saying that's an object. I, however, use the voice to tell myself to be aware. That's fine. That's functional thinking. So there's a difference between habitual worried thought, if we're talking about worried, and functional thinking. It's like this, is a functional thought, very useful. Brings you to silence. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Use thought skillfully, but let go of unskillful thought. It's just the same question, really, I would say. Okay, what is the critical, so that was on thought. What is the critical difference between wholesome and unwholesome desire? Well, we'd say unwholesome desire is basically stupid desire. Put it that way. And wholesome desire is intelligent desire. That's a kind of good way to put it. And so if I'm thirsty and I want water, it seems like an intelligent desire. But if I want to get rid of my thoughts, that would be an unintelligent desire, because I don't understand the nature of thinking. And yet to want to go beyond thinking would be a wholesome desire. So I want to go beyond thinking. I want to go to the silence of the mind. Then the intelligence is, okay, how do I fulfill that aspiration? Rather than just trying to get rid of something. So unwholesome desire is just trying to get rid of things or trying to become some experience. In the meditative life, wholesome desire, I would say, is that yearning for awakening. And then the intelligence would be, how do I do that? Unwholesome desire would be just like trying to get some experience, some meditative experience, trying to get rid of something, and be very much caught up with that. How do we use awareness or mindfulness to forgive others, especially when they either did not apologize or acknowledge that they are hurting us? Well, welcome to samsara. Well, you got to be careful of your expectations. Be nice if everyone who stepped on my toes would apologize, but don't wait for it. And so we have etiquettes and moral disciplines, but if you want to be free, you've got to see that freedom can only lie in your own heart. If someone is abused, then of course it's a legal question, it's a community question. That's different. And if someone is not living according to legal standards and legal agreements, so in a monastery, say, if a monk does something wrong, there's a whole way of apologizing, and we honor that. If a monk didn't honor that, then we say, well, you better live somewhere else. So it's not like we just allow people to do what they want to do. But there's another way to look at these human interactions is say the person that gets up your nose, as I like to say, do you use that phrase in Singapore? A person that irritates you is your teacher. You don't tell them that, but that arising of irritation and their coarseness or their insensitivity is not socially appropriate, but if you have no choice to call them on it, then how does the sense of self get created through that? So mindfulness would be to see, let's say I was kind towards someone and they didn't, and then they were unkind to me, they didn't thank me, I really went out of my way to help them, and now I've been sort of disappointed by them, and I come and I meditate. That memory comes into mind. That memory feels like an unjust experience. And that feeling of the memory, then what does it do? It creates thought. And the thought is, that's wrong, they shouldn't have done that, I'm never going to talk to them, I'm never going to forgive them. That's called Sakkaya Ditthi or Attavada, the creation of a sense of self through thought driven by emotion. So mindfulness knows that disappointment feels this way and stays with the disappointment before it goes into thought. Preconceptual. What is the feeling of being like yesterday, betrayed, even stronger, or being insulted? It feels like this. Socially, you say you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, fine. That you work out how you work out. But as a contemplative, you see, if you're going to be free, only you can be free from your own heart. If your freedom is dependent on someone else, you're in trouble. And you can't always forgive. Sometimes you're just not ready to forgive. Like someone might, maybe someone's really unkind to you 10 times in a row, and they come to you and I ask for your forgiveness. Every time they insult you, they come and they say, I ask for your forgiveness. And you look at you and you've just done that 10 times and you want my forgiveness. Go away. So, sometimes we get too idealistic about these. I should always forgive, and then people use us for that. If you can't forgive, fine. Just keep the precepts, don't hurt them, and then keep your own counsel. But not being able to forgive would always be an impediment in the mind, because every time the memory of that person would come up, there'd be that, I'm going to get back at him, I'm getting revenge. So eventually you work it out, it's just not worth it. If I want the peace of the mind, I want to relax in the mind. It might take some doing, I know that like sometimes I've had in my own practice, all of a sudden all these resentments would come up about things that happened to me 5 years ago. Just like, wow, that one. It's just like these purification of resentments coming up. And I wasn't really holding them, but somehow they would come up into my mind. So mindfulness would the real key is, I think, Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view. The difference between knowing disappointment is disappointment and taking it personally is what we mean by non-attachment. The arising of disappointment is natural, and then the holding of disappointment is through thought and the ego sense of that's unjust, that's wrong, and so on. And then the knowing of disappointment just as it is, before it goes into ego thinking, that's what non-attachment is. And from that, it can work its way out, it can cease. Non-attachment doesn't mean not having any emotions. That's not human, we're human. And those are all the little knots that we're trying to unravel or undo in our minds. One more. I have been attending Dhamma class for 6 years. My classmates are into meditation and attending jhana. They want to get good last thought moment, but I just want to meditate to get peace. Go for peace. Should I aim for jhana? I don't agree with that word. If someone is thinking they should get something, that to me is still a Sakkaya Ditthi. I am someone who wants to become something, and the Dhamma is seen when Sakkaya Ditthi is let go of. So I would say, don't get intimidated by this stuff. Be careful that we can. In Buddhist circles, you get this kind of like, this person has this attainment. It's like they've got a Lexus, and you've only got a Volkswagen. Oh gosh, they've got Lexus. But that's a kind of, it's a funny cultural thing in Theravada, and I think it's a misrepresentation of what that word means. Last moment. I think a lot, don't I? But I pondered that one, and if I think we overplay the last moment. Again, I don't know, I haven't been there, or if I have been there, I can't remember. But we asked this of Tancho Kun Prayuto, was very well loved and a very wise monk in Thailand, very, very erudite. And we asked him about that last moment thing, and he said, well, his analogy was, it's like you have a corral of horses. So there's a fence of maybe 20 horses, and there's a corral, and they're milling around. And the rancher comes and opens the gate, and then the horse closest to the gate gets out first. But then very quickly, the strongest horse leads the herd. Are horses in herds? Is that right? Leads the herd of horses and is dominant. And so he said that's how your life energy is, that if the dominant energy of your life has been good, then that's the dominant energy which will then condition the next possibility. And what I kind of joke about it, I was saying, I think the other day with William and Corina, I said, so I'm in palliative care now, right? And they got me on the morphine. And the nurse then sticks a needle into my arm. And she kind of doesn't do it well, and it hurts. And I said, you. And then I'm reborn in hell. It doesn't seem logical. Like that whole lifetime of goodness is that now. So these are hypothetical things. And I think we worry much too much about them. But the realization of the unconditioned is not tomorrow. Or the like we say, akalika dhamma, not a matter of time. So someone is still, for me, looking for some experience in time. There's still Sakkaya Ditthi, there's still personality, there's still tanha. But the abandonment of tanha, the abandonment, relinquishment of craving is here and now. It's not something you get later on. So the logic of that, to me, is totally flawed. It's like, I don't think the person really understands. But it is a cultural thing, and we'll talk about it in cultural ways. But if you take the logic of akalika Dhamma, not a matter of time, santitiko, akaliko, ehipasiko, here and now, see the Dhamma for yourself, letting go, relinquishment, abandonment of craving and becoming, Sakaya Ditti, Silabhata Paramasa, the Vichikicha, the fetters which block you from seeing Dharma, you look at all that, well, it can only be here and now. It can't be later. And me wanting to get something later, to me that seems like avijja right away. Avijja pachaya sankara, with ignorance as condition, there is the sense of self trying to become something. So I feel quite passionate about that in that sense, and I think there can be a misrepresentation. Not that those states of mind are wrong, but I think when we get intimidated by those, I would look at that. So my references are more like foreground, background, here and now, akalika Dhamma, letting go rather than attainment. But that's me. And there's other ways to look at it. So I think I've talked enough. So let us finish with the page 36. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, standing or walking, seated or lying down, freed from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Closing homage. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Soakatua Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang namasami. Supatipanno bhagavato sāvaka saṅkho sāṅghang namami.
Let us pay respect to Luang Por with 3 bows.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Luang Por. Let us be in attention as Luang Por takes his leaves.